you consider yourself, what is the term, political art? Is it political art? How do you classify, or do you?
Well, it varies. I think in some ways the art is political, but a lot of times it's also social, and obviously some of my art is landscape now, partly to get out of my studio once in a while.
Ah.
But the political art is, I would say it was primary to my work.
So it's social commentary too. Okay.
It's social commentary, it's art historical commentary. It combines things from different periods, and the idea is kind of to put together an image that will involve the viewer, but make him also think of some of the elements that are combined there.
Are you from Northern California?
No, originally from back east, born in New York City, but lived in New Jersey. One of my folks lived in New Jersey.
What brought you out here?
I came out here because the University of California was the only university that accepted me.
Is that in Berkeley?
Yes. I also came out because I went to a private school back east, which at the time was more Republican than it is now, although it has two presidents in its background. One is our present one. But I was on the crew team there. And no, I went to Andover.
Oh, Andover, the prep
Phillips
school.
Academy.
Okay.
And there I was on the crew team, and Cal had a good crew team, and the coach says, "Hey, you might like the West Coast." It was 3,000 miles from home, and at the time I was not thinking too much about art, although one of the things at school was that they had a really good museum on the campus, and I used to spend a lot of time there because you could disappear there, and they had beautiful leather couches that you could, and nobody could find you. You could doze forever and look at Aikens and Church and Cole and weird William Chamberlain paintings.
And weird
Edward
Hans
Hopper.
Hoffman. You're right.
Yeah, the odd one of those too, yes. And it was a nice transition to come to California, although.
Why did they have a large Hans Hoffman collection?
That's 'cause he left that was left to the University Museum. He came out here and was influential in the 30s. He taught, I think, here for a couple of summer sessions, and he was friends with a couple of the professors here. I think it was Glenn Wessels, and it's kind of the Bauhaus connection. And of course, his teaching at Cal was extremely influential. A lot of the teachers kind of picked up on the Bauhaus method and Hoffman's teachings. He wasn't here that often or that long, but I think he was influential in a lot of the artists, especially some of the ones that came back from after the war on the GI Bill. Particularly, well, I think probably Elmer Bischoff and a number of the other artists like that. So he was, a lot of things that were important to him were space and control of space, and of course color, and how you can control the picture plane.
Yeah. Had you always wanted to be a painter?
Well,
Ever since you were little?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think one of my first memories is being a small child and hardly being able to look up over a coffee table and having my family dog eat my crayons. So that was. I did want to be an artist, and after I went to Cal for a year, then was in the Army at the language school, and then in Europe. And it was there that I really decided, when I came back to Cal that I wanted to switch over from Slavic languages to art.
So when you were at Berkeley, what was your work like? What were your paintings like?
Well, I think I was influenced somewhat at that time by work I'd seen in Europe when I was in Europe. And some of that was very early Ron Kitai's work, who later came and taught it at Cal.
Who now lives in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm. David Hockney a little later, but probably just a lot of European art, and of course a lot of very historical European art that went back in time. But I've always was always interested in the figure, even though at Cal I kind of learned through the kind of the Hoffmannesque teaching of going more from the abstract to the particular. So I still approach painting from an abstract point of view first. My sketchbooks are filled with people and characters, and can be from anywhere. Can be from a copy of, like in this particular piece, from most of the figures in here are from Goya. So then they kind of coalesce into an idea, and then it's almost like putting them on a stage.
Are these figures performing a story? Is there a storyline to examples to this painting or to those?
On certain ones there are. This particular one came about as it's actually started as an offshoot from a Woody Allen short story. There's a Woody Allen short story where, and I can't remember the title of it, where he finds this magician in Brooklyn who can put you into his magic cabinet with a book, and you'll enter into that book. So the one he picked was Madame Bovary, and Woody Allen, and the character in the piece shows up and has this relationship with Madame Bovary back and forth and into the novel, and then she persuades him to bring her to the Plaza Hotel, and finally he has to break it off, but then the upshot of that is that he's lonely for her. He goes back to Brooklyn. The guy isn't there. He grabs a book, jumps into the magic cabinet, but he's grabbed the wrong book. He's grabbed a book of Spanish grammar, and he's last seen being pursued over the Spanish landscape by a Spanish irregular verb. So that's Woody up in the corner there with the Spanish irregular verb to pursue. So then it became Spanish, and I'd been doing some drawings from Goya, so then it became Goya, and there's a portrait of Goya in there on the little string there with one of his giants. And then because I like the Jacques Callot, and there's that connection from Callot to Goya, because Jacques Callot in the 1600s did drawings and etchings of kind of a disasters of war of that time, the 100 Years' War. Two dwarfs, his two gobies, they're called, into the giants that often appear in Goya's. And then I think the only other one thrown in is the art historian here, from our day. Although,
who is that, Peter Seltz?
Well, I don't think so. But I think there's only two figures that aren't from Goya or from Callot.
Who is the person that is peeping over the side of the hill, watching the duel?
That's also from a Goya.
Uh-huh.
it's from one of his paintings. Some of these are from drawings, based on his drawings, and so I've colored them in.
Do you consider yourself a political artist?
I guess in thinking about that, I'd have to say I'm just a subversive artist. Although I think in some ways some of the work is getting more political. I think as you're confronted more by a kind of obnoxious right-wing attitude in this country, you have to get a little bit more confrontive. Some of the work has been, all those certain pieces like a piece over there which is Mexican-based with a certain imperial mentality, and there are the odd references in it to the U.S. or to the world outside of Mexico.
And the association between the two. I see Pancho Villa.
Yeah, a number of figures
I
from
think I see Zorro.
Mexican history, yes. Pancho Villa.
The Virgin of Guadalupe.
Yes, Benito Juarez, Conquistador, and then the other base of the figures. There's one, the one beige figure with her arms outstretched is taken from a pottery piece, from pre-Columbian pottery that's I saw in Oaxaca in the Tamayo Museum. And Goya May painting of the executions by Napoleon's troops. And then the other figures there are from the execution of Maximilian, kind of taken from that execution of Maximilian by the French troops in Mexico.
Yeah, I see the American tourists.
Well, actually,
or are they English?
One's German and the other's Finnish.
Oh. Wrong.
The American one is up there roped by Sub-Commander Marcos, or Zero, which I can't remember which one.
You talked about a correlation between the pre-Columbian work and Goya. Do you think that Goya was influenced by pre-Columbian?
Well, I don't know if he I don't know if he would have seen that. It's quite possible he would have seen that, but it's also, I mean, with him, I think probably that figure is also a crucifixion figure.
So it's like a master gesture.
Yeah,
Universal.
I would think so.
How do you select the countries that you're going to paint about, like Mexico?
Well, having been to Mexico, I think that's part of it, and because there is that connection with the U.S. and our histories intertwine.
John, we've heard the story about the painting in back of you. What about the Mexican painting? What's the story there?
Well,
it's just a general narrative?
It's in particular, it's a narrative. It's set the wall behind these the characters in the front is from Mitla, so it's also an ancient Zapotec wall. The figures up above the wall tend to be what I would say would be the historical, and maybe on most of them the liberal side. And the figure, the pre-Columbian figure that's central, is protecting the poor, and the figures of the soldiers obviously represent the oligarchy there, and the sub-commander who's floating through the sky with his submarine is pulling Salinas de Gortari, the disgraced president of Mexico, with some other of his cronies.
Does reading the newspapers stimulate you to make a painting in protest?
Yes, I would. I would think so. Reading the newspapers, looking at the TV, listening to NPR.
Yeah.
I mean, one can even get.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten. There's too much stuff to start on an anti-NPR painting, but there's too much stuff ahead of them. But they do irritate me some too. But no, ideas are just out there.
You paint, what, 12 hours a day? Do you have a
I
set
wouldn't say
schedule?
that. No, lunch is very important. No, I'm here. I'm probably here 8 hours a day, but painting, I think you have to consider the other things that you do, reading, whatever is
Listening
part
to
of it. Part of that is
listening to NPR.
part of that's research. I can paint while I listen to NPR. Maybe I paint better if I listen to Tom Waits, though.
Yeah.
know?
Oh, yeah. You said earlier that you're now beginning to paint landscapes more rather than the
Well, I'm
commentary.
painting landscapes some.
Are they a commentary also, or just
They're
Just
they're
landscape.
partly a way to get out outside.
so you paint from life? You don't take a photograph and then paint.
No, well, I'll sketch or paint. I sometimes do take photographs, but that's usually if I'm on a trip somewhere and hang the camera out the window as I'm flying along, just as an idea for a memory or particular, maybe a color reference, something like that. But as you can see with the landscapes, the colors tend to change. They tend to get more into the colors that I use regularly. Although Northern California particularly and places like Italy also have a lot of those colors.
So this is a landscape.
This one here?
Yeah.
No, this is the third. This is one that's kind of just in progress. It's the third prophecy of Fatima. With it's the other political element is for me is my Catholic background. So
A lapsed Catholic or an active Catholic?
Lapsed. I don't know if I was ever. I was I was given the last rites as an infant, so.
Wow.
So I don't know if I.
Happily it
I don't.
didn't work.
I don't know if that. Well, I don't know if that. What the effect of that was, but no. The Catholic Church has always been fascinating to me. It's.
Your
It's
family is Catholic?
My father was Catholic, yes, and.
So you came back to
Well,
Catholicism.
it's probably because my mother was a Catholic conspiracy theorist, so, and she had she knew the history of the Catholic Church better than my father did. So.
Why the last rites?
Oh,
you were
just,
very ill as a child?
Well, when I was born, I was just
Wow.
convulsions. I don't know
My
exactly.
goodness. Well, you sure look healthy now.
Well,
A few aches and pains.
yeah, the odd ache and pain. Yeah.
And also, now that I look, I see the landscapes that are true landscapes, which are wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
They
But
are.
my first love is still the figurative paintings. As it turned out, the landscapes also sell faster.
Do you have a gallery in San Francisco?
Not at the moment. I do have work at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Artist Gallery out at Fort Mason. Yeah. But I was with a gallery in LA that Robbie was with for a while, but
Who's that?
Copland.
Oh, yeah,
But
Marty.
yeah,
Yeah.
she sold a number of the more political work, but I don't think it was her cup of tea.
The choice of figures is really interesting. Like, You know, the Via, those people. But like in the painting on the easel, who are those people? There's
Well, in that particular piece, 2 or 3 of the figures are from Mexican masks.
yeah, but it looks like a California landscape.
It's supposed to be sort of Spanish, you know, dry,
Yeah.
slightly dry and whatever. The three children's figures are just from sketches. The figure of the Virgin is partly from partly from just a sketch out of my head, but it might have also been influenced by one particular Goya drawing. The kind of strange Dutch girl, I don't know where she came from. I don't know why she's there.
Took the wrong road.
Yes.
The bird and the number 3.
That's the third prophecy. And that's still, I haven't decided if that's going to stay there or not. These are kind of a contradiction. You have peace doves with the three prophecies. The first 2 have already gone off, and this bird is blasting out the
3 kids.
the third at the children.
And who is that in the closest burning bush?
That's a good question. I haven't figured that one out. It may just be the prompter.
Oh, that's true. It looks like a prompter's box.
Yeah, it could be God. I don't know. Taken on a human form. I'm not sure.
And the guy in the kayak or the little boat there, the Boston Whaler or whatever it is?
He's a painter. He's got a little brush in his hand.
Oh, I see.
And he's actually dragging some color along the cliff, kind of to let you know it's not real. And waiting for something to rain on his parade, I guess.
Yeah. And the dog is barking at the devil?
Yes, the devil, that's our present Pope as the shepherd with his crook there. And this is part of Catholic lore that Pope John Paul said that the Virgin Mary deflected the bullet from him when Aja shot at him in the square. He deflected the bullet because she deflected the bullet because he had more work to do. So I've just maybe changed that, reinterpret that a little. It wasn't really the Virgin Mary. She was giving out the 3 prophecies of Fatima. It was the devil because he felt that John Paul had more work to do, but from his point of view. So, and actually the Pope took the bullet and it's at the shrine of Fatima because he believes that she saved him. She directed the bullet away from his heart.
And the Virgin, again, is throwing up her hands, like in the Mexican one hand in the Mexican painting, or the pre-Columbian. Again, the master gesture.
Well, it could be, or it could be she's surprised at what came out of her mouth.
Can we talk about the beach scene with the Chicago Bears?
Sure, that's an older one. It's actually has, there's a Robbie Cannell reference in that. That is a reference to Robbie Cannell of the Mickey Mouse ears disappearing over the horizon. That was from his old poster, Pete Wilson with the smiley faces. So this is just a more a local social scene with Venice Beach with all the characters. Some who were probably pretty recognizable, and then some who aren't. the Chicago Bears, and those are a couple of tourists. He's wearing his anti-NAFTA hat and photographing all the locals. The artist appears behind the palm tree with his little sign that says, "We'll do we'll do conceptual art for food." I think that's.
And who is that?
That's moi. No, that's me. And we have all sorts of. There's a little Godzilla coming over the horizon from Japan.
And the smiley face in the sun?
The smiley face again that was from Robbie's. That's the sun. That was from Robbie Cannell's poster of Pete Wilson. But it's also taken on different meanings since then, because we all know that Disney is more predominant than they used to be.
Has Robbie seen this painting?
Yes, this is an older. This is probably about 10 years old.
I love the characters, the muscle beach guys. Boy, what pecs!
Well, I don't know. They're smaller than life now.
They're older.
This was before we realized how good steroids were.
They could have gone
making us all larger.
The Lady Buccaneer. Oh,
that one. That's just that's kind of a fun painting. She's Grace O'Malley, Pirate Queen. I have a friend. My framer from years ago is Carol Malley, and I ran into this thing of a historical figure, Grace O'Malley, who was a pirate queen, and this is her crew.
These are all the framers in the shop?
No, these are just our this is from my Irish background. These are the redheads and the Irish pirates.
It's lovely to see a woman pirate.
Oh yeah, she was quite famous. She took over her father's business, which was being a pirate on the west coast of Ireland. She controlled a lot of territory, and finally was pardoned by Queen Elizabeth after having a personal meeting with Queen Elizabeth. They wanted to solve this problem of Grace because she was causing them so much trouble.
Grace sounds really cool.
Oh yeah, no, she was a character.
What was that? Late 1800s?
Well, no, this
1700s?
was Queen Elizabeth. This was in this when 16.
Okay, really a long time ago. How fab! Who's the peg leg guy?
Oh, that's an Irish leprechaun.
Oh.
He's just you have to stick one of those into an Irish painting somewhere.
And then my eye is going to the golden lab in the back of the pickup truck.
Well, he's not exactly a golden lab.
Okay, because I can't.
He's more kind of a pit bull.
Oh, is he? A golden pit bull?
Yeah, kind of a golden pit bull. That's kind of a combination, figurative and landscape painting. It's actually from up in Walnut Grove. There's a friend bought a piece of property up there. And that's the taqueria, the taco wagon, and people are having lunch out there. So, but then there are also a couple of guys, a guy and his dog confronting you. You have to walk by them to get to the taco wagon.
Do you have to pay them? It's like a
no,
toll
I don't
bridge.
think so. I don't think so. No.
Have you ever shown just the drawings?
No.
You don't want to?
Well, it's most of them are pretty small, so and most of them are just in the sketchbook. I haven't. There are a few. It's one thing I've thought of doing more recently is getting back to doing some larger charcoals. I have one or two here or there, but it's primarily been just a source of ideas for the paintings.
Would you be adverse to showing them?
No. No.
Because I think that's very interesting, how you know, the drawing and then where the painting goes to from the drawing.
Oh yes, I mean, if my sketchbooks, you kind of go through my sketchbooks and you can see, oh, this figure's in that painting, this figure's in that one, you know, and different figures from different sketchbooks end up in the same painting. It's kind of you're thinking, okay, well, who works in here,
Yeah.
right? And what do they bring to? Do they bring something else to the piece? So.
The titles of these paintings, please say they're not called untitled. I hate that.
No, they have titles. The landscape paintings are harder to title. Those are usually just titled where they some landmark near them or something like that. But no, this particular painting behind me is titled Gobies and Goyables. Gobies because of the two Gobi figures from Jacques Collot. Goyables because they're kind of smaller figures from Goya, like collectibles, lunchables, everything's, you know, so they fall into that kind of category. Also then there's that certain element of humor in it too, which is important. I like to keep my my political things somewhat humorous.
Do you begin a painting with the humor first? I mean, do you know you want to make it humorous? Or does it just happen because you're Irish?
No, well, I think some of it comes in. I think some of it comes in with individual figures, because a lot of times the subject is perhaps more serious, and then to lighten it up here or there, I'll introduce a figure that's a little bit more off the wall.
What's the name of the next painting, the Mexican?
That's called El Remedio.
El Remedio.
That's kind of the solution, the remedy.
Ah, and the pit bull?
The pit bull is just called El Charro Taco Wagon.
It's an interesting taco wagon because at least in Los Angeles, we see mostly the tamales.
Uh-huh.
The tamale wagons,
Yeah.
or the General Roach coach.
Uh-huh. Well, I think here it's most of the ones up here are owned by a taqueria, and that's just why they're called taco wagons.
And what about the Pope?
Well, that one's called the Third Prophecy of Fatima.
And Grace?
Grace, it's called Grace O'Malley, Pirate Queen. Men love to serve under her. Well, that's not as bad as the one for. I had to finally cut the one out for Venice Beach. I had a long title for that. I'll call it just Venice Beach.
What was the original title?
The original title was Venice Beach, or Richard Feynman reincarnated as a yellow dog finds the center for the Big Bang, which is another dog's butt, pink butt next to him. So there are two dogs
An
in
homage to Caltech, right?
Yeah, and to dogs in general.
How do you decide on your landscapes? You just drive till you see a place that you want to paint?
Yeah, in a lot of cases, yes, or I've been past them.
Mm-hmm.
What I do now is I have an old GPS unit, and if I see a spot and I can't really, it's kind of hard to stop or whatever, I'll take a reading and then write it down, and then come back and put it on the map, and next time we'll go by and see if I have more time. But
Well,
that's one way that I do it.
Explain what the GPS
unit. It's the thing that they use in the end of the smart bombs to, blow people, to get the exact hit. Well, it's a global positioning system that.
And you have that installed in your car?
No, it's a little handheld one that people can. A lot of people use them now for hiking and whatever, because you can.
Oh, that's interesting.
Follow, make sure you can get your way back to camp or
Yeah.
wherever you've been.
Huh.
So, but most of them are probably from around Sonoma. There are probably 3 or 4 places that I've gone back and painted a few times at different times of the year. And it's amazing on some how much change has gone on. Some that are painted 3, 4 years ago, which were just kind of empty, with space with rolling hills or whatever, now have vineyards over them. And
Yeah, exactly.
I'd like to get back to Spain. I have one of the things I've never been to is the Prado, and for somebody who likes Goya a lot, that's
a
not too
must
good.
see. Yeah,
That's not too
exactly.
good. I would like to see the world get to a place where I was just painting humorous paintings instead of politically aimed humorous paintings. I think. I mean, one of my favorite artists is always, and I think one of the reasons I probably got involved in art was George Harriman, who was the cartoon artist who created Crazy Cat, and his Crazy Cat is just, from my point of view, fantastic work, and in a way that it would be nice if the world could go more to that. That we didn't have so many politically incorrect people in our own country.
And all over
And by
the
politically
world.
incorrect,
Yeah, right.
I mean the ones that I don't like.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, that we are really in big trouble. And
No,
this is for the world to hear. We know we're in trouble.
Well, I have a couple of, as I imagine Robbie has, I have a couple of Ashcroft works in the wings.
Ah, but they're not finished. They're not.
No, I've got the sketches for them, but I haven't. I have to decide what size they're going to be.
Yeah.
Some of the humorists, where are guys like Mort Saul when we, the old guys to come back and deal with these characters in a real political way.
He is still performing, but I think, wouldn't that be cool if he performed again in Berkeley?
Well, at least or some of the younger comedians. You'd think, well, all right.
Are there
Well, they're not
mortals coming up? I don't think so.
No, I don't. I think they're less political and more. How would you say it? Just dirty talking.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is,
Yeah, no.
You can combine the two.
Right. Well, nobody's ever done that. That's going to be your job.
Well, no,
you could have a side career.
Lenny Bruce did a little.
Yeah. It is time, and I never go to the comedy clubs, but there must be somebody coming.
Oh, there probably is.
Yeah.
But we artists can't afford to go to the comedy clubs.
Right. That's true. Okay, I think that's it. John, thank you very much.
An image that will involve the viewer, but make him also think of some of the elements that are combined there.
Are you from Northern California?
No, originally from back east, born in New York City, but lived in New Jersey. One of my folks lived in New Jersey.
What brought you out here?
I came out here because the University of California was the only university that accepted me.
Is that in Berkeley?
Yes. I also came out because I went to a private school back east, which at the time was more Republican than it is now, although it has 2 presidents in its background. One is our present one. But I was on the crew team
Yale?
there. And no, I went to Andover.
Oh, Andover, the prep
Phillips
school.
Academy.
Okay.
And there I was on the crew team, and Cal had a good crew team, and the coach says, "Hey, you might like the West Coast." It was 3,000.
Do you consider yourself, what is the term, political art? Is it political art? How do you classify, or do you?
Well, it varies. I think in some ways the art is political, but a lot of times it's also social, and obviously some of my art is landscape now, partly to get out of my studio once in a while.
Ah.
But the political art is, I would say it was primary to my work.
So it's social commentary too. Okay.
It's social commentary, it's art historical commentary. It combines things from different periods, and the idea is kind of to put together 1,000 miles from home. And at the time I was not thinking too much about art, although one of the things at school was that they had a really good museum on the campus, and I used to spend a lot of time there because you could disappear there, and they had beautiful leather couches that you could, and nobody could find you. You could doze forever and look at Aikens and Church and Cole and weird William Chamberlain paintings.
And weird
Edward
Hans
Hopper.
Hoffman. You're right.
Yeah, the odd one of those too, yes. And it was a nice transition to come to California, although.
Why do they have a large Hans Hoffman collection?
That's 'cause he left that was left to the University Museum. He came out here and was influential in the 30s. He taught, I think, here for a couple of summer sessions, and he was friends with
Wanted to be a painter?
Well,
Ever since you were little?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think one of my first memories is being a small child and hardly being able to look up over a coffee table and having my family dog eat my crayons. So that was I did want to be an artist, and after I went to Cal for a year, then was in the Army at the language school, and then in Europe. And it was there that I really decided, when I came back to Cal, that I wanted to switch over from Slavic languages to art.
So when you were at Berkeley, what was your work like? What were your paintings like?
Well, I think I was influenced somewhat at that time by work I'd seen in Europe when I was in Europe. And a couple of the professors here, I think it was Glenn Wessels, and it's kind of the Bauhaus connection. And of course his teaching at Cal was extremely influential. A lot of the teachers kind of picked up on the Bauhaus method and Hoffman's teachings. He wasn't here that often or that long, but I think he was influential on a lot of the artists, especially some of the ones that came back from after the war on the GI Bill. Particularly, well, I think probably Elmer Bischoff and a number of the other artists like that. So he was, a lot of things that were important to him were space and control of space, and of course color, and how you can control the picture plane.
Yeah. Had you always wanted